Welcome to the Quiet Corner Bedtime Stories. I'm Annie, and along with my co-host Amon, we're here to share our favourite classic stories, accompanied by soothing music to help you relax, unwind, and drift off into a peaceful night's sleep. If you enjoy our stories, please like, subscribe, and leave a rating or review on your favourite podcast platform. You can also support us on Lenny FM along with some of your other favourite podcasts, or make a donation to Ko-Fi, kofi.com, so we can continue to share these classic stories with you all. Thank you for all your support and sweet dreams.
Welcome to the Quiet Corner Bedtime Stories. I'm Amon, and tonight I'm going to read you Santa Claus and Little Billee by John Kendrick Bangs, the author of The Water Ghost of Harrowby Hall. Santa Claus and Little Billee. He was only a little bit of a chap, and so, when for the first time in his life he came into contact with the endless current of human beings, it was as hard for him to stay put as for some wayward little atom of flotsam and jetsam to keep from tossing about upon the surging tides of the sea. His mother had left him there in the big toy shop, with instructions not to move until she came back, while she went off to do some mysterious errand. She thought, no doubt, that with so many beautiful things on every side to delight his eye and to hold his attention, that strict obedience to her commands would not be hard. But alas, the good lady reckoned not upon the magnetic power of attraction of all those lovely objects in detail. She saw them only as a mass of wonders, which in all probability would so dazzle his vision as to leave him incapable of movement. But little Billee was not so indifferent as all that. When a phonograph at the end of the shop began to rattle off melodious tunes and funny little jokes, in spite of the instructions he had received, off he pattered as fast as his little legs would carry him to investigate. After that, forgetful of everything else and finding himself caught in the constantly moving stream of Christmas shoppers, he was borne along in the restless current until he found himself at last upon the street, alone, free and independent. It was great fun at first. By and by, however, the afternoon waned. The sun, as if anxious to hurry along the dawn of Christmas Day, sank early to bed, and the electric lights along the darkening highway began to pop out here and there, like so many merry stars come down to earth to celebrate the gladdest time of all the year. Little Billee began to grow tired, and then he thought of his mamma, and he tried to find the shop where he had promised to remain until her return. Up and down the street he wandered until his little legs grew weary, but there was no sign of the shop, nor of the beloved face he was seeking. Once again, and yet once again after that, did the little fellow traverse the crowded highway, his tears getting harder and harder to hold back. And then, joy of joys, whom should he see walking slowly upon the sidewalk but Santa Claus himself? The saint was decorated strangely with two queer-looking boards, with big red letters on them, hung over his back and his chest. But there was still that same kindly grey-bearded face, and the red cloak with the fur trimmings, and the same dear old cap that the children's friend had always worn in the pictures of him that little Billee had seen. With a glad cry of happiness, little Billee ran to meet the old fellow, and put his hand gently into that of the saint. He thought it was very strange that Santa Claus's hand should be so red and cold and rough and so chapped, but he was not in any mood to be critical. He had been face to face with a very disagreeable situation. And then, when everything had seemed blackest to him, everything had come right again, and he was too glad to take more than a passing notice of anything strange and odd. Santa Claus, of course, would recognize him at once, and would know just how to get him back to his mamma at home, wherever that might be. Little Billee had never thought to inquire just where home was. All he knew was that it was a big grey stone house on a long street somewhere, with a tall iron railing in front of it, not far from the park. "Howdy do, Mr. Santa Claus," said little Billy, as the other's hand unconsciously tightened around his own. "Why, howdy do, kiddo," replied the old fellow, glancing down at his newfound friend with surprise gleaming from his deep-set eyes. "Where did you drop from?" "Oh, I'm out," said little Billy bravely. "My mamma left me a little while ago, while she went off about something, and I guess I'm lost it." "Oh, very likely," returned the old saint with a smile. "Little 2x4 fellows are apt to get losted when they start out on their own hook, especially on days like these with such crowds hustling around." "But it's all right now," suggested little Billy hopefully. "I'm found again, ain't I?" "Oh, yes. Yes, indeedy, you're found all right, kiddo," Santa Claus agreed. "And pretty soon you'll take me home again, won't you?" said the child. "Surest thing you know," answered Santa Claus, looking down upon the bright but tired little face with a comforting smile. "Where might your address be?" "My what?" asked little Billy. "Your address," repeated Santa Claus. "Where do you live?" The answer was a ringing peal of childish laughter. "As if you didn't know that," cried little Billy, giggling. "Ha ha!" laughed Santa Claus. "Can't fool you, can I? It would be funny if, after keeping an eye on you all these years since you was a babby, I didn't know where you lived, huh?" "Awful funny," agreed little Billy. "But tell me, Mr. Santa Claus, what sort of boy do you think I've been?" he added, with a shade of anxiety in his voice. "Pretty good, yes, pretty good," Santa Claus answered, turning his steps and walking back again along the path he had just travelled, which little Billy thought was rather a strange thing to do. "You've got more white marks than black ones, a good many more, 150 times as many, kiddo. In fact, you're all right. Way up among the good boys, although once or twice last summer, you know." "Yes, I know," said little Billy meekly, "but I didn't mean to be naughty." "That's just what I said to the bookkeeper," said Santa Claus. "So he gave you a grey mark, half white and half black. That doesn't count either way, for or against you." "Thank you, sir," said little Billy, much comforted. "Don't mention it. You're very welcome, kiddo," said Santa Claus, giving the youngster's hand a gentle squeeze. "Why do you call me kiddo when you know my name is Little Billy?" asked the boy. "Oh, that's just what I call all good boys," explained Santa Claus. "You see, we divide them up into two kinds, good boys and naughty boys, and good boys we just call kiddos, and naughty boys we call caddies, and there you are." Just then little Billy noticed for the first time the square boards that Santa Claus was wearing. "What are you wearing those boards for, Mr. Santa Claus?" he asked. If the lad had looked closely enough, he would have seen a very unhappy look come to the old man's face, but there was nothing of it in his answer. "Oh, those are my newfangled back and chest protectors, my lad," he replied. "Sometimes we have bitter winds blowing in Christmas, and I have to be ready for them. It wouldn't do for Santa Claus to come down with the sneezes at Christmas time, you know. No, sirree. This board in front of me keeps the wind off my chest, and the one behind keeps me from getting rheumatism in my back. They are a great protection against the weather." "I'll have to tell my papa about them," said little Billy, much impressed by the simplicity of this arrangement. "We have a glass board on the front of our automobile to keep the wind off old Henry. He's our chauffeur. But Papa wears a fur coat, and sometimes he says the wind goes right through that. He'll be glad to know about these boards." "I shouldn't wonder," smiled Santa Claus. "They aren't very becoming, but they're mighty useful. You might save up your pennies and give your papa a pair like them for his next Christmas." Santa Claus laughed as he spoke, but there was a catch in his voice which little Billy was too young to notice. "You've got letters painted there," said the boy, peering around in front of his companion at the lettering on the board. "What do they spell? You know I haven't learned to read yet." And why should you know how to read at your age, said Santa Claus. You're not more than 5. 5 last month, said little Billee proudly. It was such a great age. My, as old as that? Cried Santa Claus. Well, you are growing fast. Why, it don't seem more than yesterday that you was a pink-cheeked babby, and here you are big enough to be out alone. That's more than my little boy is able to do. Santa Claus shivered slightly, and little Billee was surprised to see a tear glistening in his eye. Why, have you got a little boy? He asked. Yes, little Billee, said the saint. A poor, white-faced little chap about a year older than you who... Well, never mind, kiddo. He's a kiddo too. Let's talk about something else, or I'll have icicles in my eyes. You didn't tell me what those letters on the board spell, said little Billee. Merry Christmas to everybody, said Santa Claus. I have the words printed there so everybody can see them. And if I miss wishing anybody Merry Christmas, he'll know what I meant just the same. You're awful kind, aren't you? Said little Billee, squeezing his friend's hand affectionately. It must make you happy to be able to be kind to everybody. Santa Claus made no reply to this remark, beyond giving a very deep sigh, which little Billee chose to believe was evidence of a great inward contentment. They walked on now in silence, for little Billee was beginning to feel almost too tired to talk, and Santa Claus seemed to be thinking of something else. Finally, however, the little fellow spoke. I guess I'd like to go home now, Mr. Santa Claus, he said. I'm tired, and I'm afraid my mamma will be wondering where I've gone to. That's so, my little man, said Santa Claus, stopping short in his walk up and down the block. Your mother will be worried for a fact. And your father too. I know how I'd feel if my little boy got losted and hadn't come home at dinner time. I don't believe you know where you live, though. Now, honest, come on, fess up, Billee. You don't know where you live, do you? Why, yes I do, said little Billee. It's in the big grey stone house with the iron fence in front of it, near the park. Oh, that's easy enough, laughed Santa Claus nervously. Anyone could say he lived in a grey stone house with a fence around it near the park. But you don't know what street it's on, nor the number either. I'll bet 14 wooden giraffes against a monkey on a stick. No, I don't, said little Billee frankly. But I know the number on our automobile. It's NY. Fine, laughed Santa Claus. If you were really lost, it would be a great help to know that. But not being lost, as you ain't, why, of course, we can get along without it. It's queer that you don't know your last name, though. I do too know my last name, blurted little Billee. It's Billee. That's the last one they gave me, anyhow. Santa Claus reflected a moment, eyeing the child anxiously. I don't believe you even know your papa's name, he said. Yes, I do, said little Billee indignantly. His name is Mr. Harrison. Well, you are a smart little chap, cried Santa Claus gleefully. You got it right the very first time, didn't you? I really didn't think you knew, but I don't believe you know where your papa keeps his bake shop, where he makes all those nice cakes and cookies you eat. Billee began to laugh again. You can't fool me, Mr. Santa Claus, he said. I know my papa don't keep a bake shop just as well as you do. My papa owns a bank. Splendid. Made of tin, I suppose, with a nice little hole in the top for dropping pennies into, said Santa Claus. No, it ain't either, retorted little Billee. It's made of stone, and he has more than 1,000,000 windows in it. I went down there with my mamma to papa's office the other day, so I guess I ought to know. Well, I should say so, said Santa Claus. Nobody better. By the way, Billee, what does your mamma call your papa? Billee, like you? Oh, no, indeed, returned little Billee. She calls him Papa, except for once in a while when he's going away, and she says goodbye, Tom. Ah, fine again, said Santa Claus, blowing upon his fingers. For now that the sun had completely disappeared over the west, it was getting very cold. Thomas Harrison, banker, he muttered to himself. What with the telephone book and the city directory, I guess we can find our way home with little Billee. "Do you think we can go now, Mr. Santa Claus?" asked little Billee, for the cold was beginning to cut through his little coat, and the Sandman had started to scatter the sleepy seeds all around. "Yes, sirree," returned Santa Claus promptly. "Right away, instantly and at once. I'm afraid I can't get my reindeer here in time to take us up to the house, but we can go in the cars. I don't know whether we can or not, come to think of it. Do you happen to have 10 cents in your pocket?" Santa added, with an embarrassed air. "You see, I've left my pocketbook in the sleigh with my toy pack, and besides, mine is only toy money, and they won't take that on the cars." "I got 25 cents, said little Billee proudly, and he dug his way down into his pocket and brought the shining silver piece into the light. "You can have it if you want." "Thank you," said Santa Claus, taking the proffered coin. "We'll start home right away. Only come here first while I telephone to Santaville, telling the folks where I am." He led the little fellow into a public telephone station where he eagerly scanned the names in the book. At last it was found. Thomas Harrison, 7654 Plaza. And then, in the seclusion of the telephone booth, Santa Claus sent the gladdest of all Christmas messages over the wire to 2 distracted parents. "I have found your boy wandering in the street. He is safe, and I will bring him home right away." 15 minutes later, there might have been seen the strange spectacle of a footsore Santa Claus leading a sleepy little boy up Fifth Avenue to a cross street which shall remain nameless. The boy vainly endeavoured to persuade his companion to come in and meet Mama. "No, Billee," said the old man sadly. "I must hurry back. You see, kiddo, this is my busy day. Besides, I never go into a house except through the chimney, and I wouldn't know how to behave going in through a front door." But it was not to be as Santa Claus willed. For little Billee's papa and his mamma, and his brothers and sisters, and the butler, and the housemaids, and 2 or 3 policemen were all waiting at the front door when they arrived. "Aha!" said one of the police, seizing Santa Claus roughly by the arm. "We've landed you all right. Where have you been with this boy?" "You let him alone," cried little Billee, and with more courage than he had ever expected to show in the presence of a policeman. "He's a friend of mine." "That's right, officer," said little Billee's father. "Let him alone. I haven't entered any complaint against this man." "But you want to look out for these fellas, Mr. Harrison," returned the officer. "First thing you know, they'll be making a trade of this sort of thing." "I'm no grafter," retorted Santa Claus indignantly. "I found this little chap wandering along the street, and as soon as I was able to locate where he lived, I brought him home, and that's all there is to it." "He knew where I lived all along," laughed little Billee. "Only he pretended he didn't just to see if I knew." "You see, sir," said the officer, "it won't do him any harm to cool his heels." "It is far better that he should warm them, officer," said Mr. Harrison kindly. "And he can do that here. Come in, my man," he added, turning to Santa Claus with a grateful smile. "Just for a minute, anyhow. Mrs. Harrison will wish to thank you for bringing our boy back to us. We have had a terrible afternoon." "That's all right, sir," said Santa Claus modestly. "It wasn't anything, sir. I didn't really find him. It was him as found me. He took me for the real thing, I guess." Nevertheless, Santa Claus, led by little Billee's persistent father, went into the house. And now that the boy could see him in the full glare of many electric lights, his furs did not seem the most gorgeous thing in the world. When the flapping front of his red jacket flew open, the child was surprised to see how ragged was the thin grey coat it covered. And as for the good old saint's comfortable stomach, well, strange to say, it was not. I wish you all a Merry Christmas," faltered Santa Claus, "but really I must be going, sir." "Nonsense," cried Mr. Harrison. "Not until you've got rid of this chill, and—" "I can't stay, sir," said Santa. "I'll lose my job if I do." "Well, what if you do? "I'll give you a better one," said the banker. "I can't," faltered the man. I've got a little Billee of my own at home waiting for me, sir. If I hadn't," he added fiercely, "do you suppose I'll be doing this?" He pointed at the painted boards and he shuddered. "It's him has kept me from the river," he muttered hoarsely. And then this dispenser of happiness to so many millions of people all around the world sank into a chair, and covering his face with his hands, he wept like a child. "I guess Santa Claus is tired, Papa," said little Billee, snuggling up close to the old fellow and taking hold of his hand sympathetically. "Yes, my son," said Mr. Harrison gravely. "These are very busy times for Santa Claus, and I guess that, as he still has a hard night ahead of him, James had better ring up Henry and tell him to bring the car around right away, so that we may take him back to his little boy. We'll have to lend him a fur coat to keep the wind off too, for it is a bitter night." "Oh," said little Billee, "I haven't told you about these boards he wears. He has them to keep the wind off, and they're fine, Papa." Little Billee pointed to the 2 signboards which Santa Claus had leaned against the wall. "He says he uses them on cold nights," the lad went on. "They have writing on 'em too. Do you know what it says?" "Yes," said Mr. Harrison, glancing at the boards. "It says if you want a good Christmas dinner for a quarter, then go to Smithers Cafe." Little Billee roared with laughter. "Papa's trying to fool me just as you did when you pretended to not know where I lived, Santa Claus," he said, looking up into the old fellow's face, his own countenance brimming over with mirth. "You mustn't think he can't read, though," the lad added hastily. "He's only joking." "Oh, no, indeed, I shouldn't have thought that," replied Santa Claus, smiling through his tears. "I've been joking, have I?" said little Billee's papa. "Well then, Mr. Billiam, I suppose you can inform me what it says on these boards." "Merry Christmas to everybody," said little Billee proudly. "I couldn't read it myself, but he told me what it said. He has it printed there, so if he misses saying it to anybody, then they'll know that he means it just the same." "By Jove, Mr. Santa Claus," cried little Billee's papa, grasping the old man warmly by the hand, "I owe you 10 million apologies. I haven't believed in you for many a long year, but now, sir, I take it all back. You do exist, and by the great horn spoon, you're the real thing." Little Billee had the satisfaction of acting as host to Santa Claus at a good luscious dinner, which Santa Claus must have enjoyed very much, because when explaining why he was so hungry, it came out that the poor old chap had been so busy all day that he had not had time to get any lunch. No, not even one of those good dinners at Smithers Cafe to which little Billee's father had jokingly referred. And after dinner, Henry came back with the automobile, and bidding everybody good night, Santa Claus and little Billee's papa went out of the house together. Christmas morning dawned, and little Billee awoke from wonderful dreams of rich gifts and extraordinary adventures with his newfound friend, to find the reality quite as splendid as the dream things. Later, what was his delight when a small boy, not much older than himself, a pale, thin, but playful little fellow, arrived at the house to spend the day with him, bringing with him a letter from Santa Claus himself. This is what the letter said. "Dear little Billee, you must not tell anybody except for your mamma and papa, but the little boy who brings you this letter is my little boy, and I am going to let you have him for a playfellow for Christmas Day. Treat him kindly for his papa's sake, and if you think his papa is worth loving, tell him so. Do not forget me, little Billee. I shall see you often in the future, but I doubt you will see me. I am not going to return to 23rd Street again, but I shall continue my work in the land of Yule and the Palace of Goodwill, whose beautiful windows look out upon the homes of all good children. Goodbye, little Billee, and the happiest of Christmases to you and all of yours. Affectionately, Santa Claus." When little Billee's mamma read this to him on Christmas morning, a stray little tear ran down her cheek and fell upon little Billee's hand. "Why, what are you crying for, mamma?" he asked. "With happiness, my dear little son," his mother answered. I was afraid yesterday that I might have lost my boy forever, but now—" "You have an extra one thrown in for Christmas, haven't you?" said little Billee, taking his new playmate by the hand. The little visitor smiled back at him with a smile so sweet that anybody might have guessed that he was the son of Santa Claus. As for the latter, little Billee has not seen him again, but down at his father's bank there is a new messenger named John, who has a voice so like Santa Claus's voice that whenever little Billee goes down there in the motor to ride home at night with his papa, he runs into the bank and has a long talk with him, just for the pleasure of pretending that it is Santa Claus he is talking to. Indeed, the voice is so alike that once a sudden and strange idea flashed across little Billee's mind. "Have you ever been on 23rd Street, John?" he asked. 23rd Street, replied the messenger, scratching his head as if very much puzzled. "What's that?" "Why, it's a street," said little Billee, rather vaguely. "Well, to tell you the truth, Billee," said John, "I've heard tell of 23rd Street, and they say it's a very beautiful and interesting spot. But you know, I don't really get much of a chance to travel, and I've been too busy all my life to go abroad." "Abroad?" roared little Billee, grinning at John's utterly absurd mistake. "Why, 23rd Street ain't abroad. It's uptown, near 22nd Street. "Really?" returned John, evidently tremendously surprised. "Well, well, well, who'd have thought that? Well, if that's the case, some time when I get a week off, I'll have to go and spend my vacation there." From which little Billee concluded that his suspicion that John might be Santa Claus in disguise was entirely without foundation in fact. The end. And I hope you all have a Merry Christmas. From Amon and Annie at the Quiet Corner Bedtime Stories.